So we said yesterday.
I don't know if you should show this, because I don't bear any ill will towards Lowen now.
They'll cut it
He's
out.
a different
They'll
person.
take it. They'll cut it
He's a
out.
different person. At that time, he was just totally under Reich's thumb. And before that happened, we found out that our friends didn't want to see us anymore, because they had to choose between continuing in their therapies or seeing us.
So we lost all our
And
friends.
if their therapist found out that they were seeing us,
They'd be
the
out of
therapist would not continue their therapy. This was
He wasn't
probably
even around.
afterwards.
That name is
You see,
strange to us.
Lowen was a student therapist. He was a high school teacher, and he was in training with Reich, and he was seeing a few patients. And there were other people, Thornton?
Thornton, Dr. Thornton. I don't know
Dr.
if he's
Thornton,
around.
he was an osteopath, I believe.
And who was the guy who was
And,
on Cott, Dr. Cott, that me interviewed?
Yes,
Did you see him?
Yeah.
Well, that must have been interesting, because
Yeah.
he's not in orgone therapy anymore, is he?
No. Yeah.
He's in vitamin therapy.
Remember if the research was such that he would have been ready to publish it yet.
But, honey, remember Bill Washington this summer?
But yeah, that's a separate
No, what I'm
thing.
trying to get, Bill Washington at the University of Chicago, a mathematician.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't a mathematician. He was a graduate student.
Well, he said, he told us this himself, a year later, in 1947, he rented our farm from us. He and Mickey Sheriff rented our farm for one summer.
Because we weren't running a camp
We weren't running, we
anymore.
rented it.
Yeah.
And he said to us, Bill Washington said to us, that he felt that Reich had something in his mathematical theories. And he said to Reich that he
Having
would,
to do with pendulums.
yeah,
and-
he said to Reich he would like to use this material and present it at a forum, using Reich's name and all. So Reich said to him, you can't do that, it's got to be the whole thing I have or nothing.
Yeah. I think Bill Washington wanted to report the work without including the whole orgone theory
Yeah,
along
so
with
you-
it. And
you
Reich,
did-
well, I
Reich-
didn't know Cott. See, Cott, I knew that he came to Reich for training, probably 3 times a week, but I didn't know him socially.
No, I don't think so, sweetie.
I didn't. That must have been after I left.
Now, Dr. Cott, let's see, the only thing we had to do with Dr. Cott is that we had a friend of ours whose wife was very sick, had a breakdown.
Yeah.
And we brought her to Dr. Cott. Of course, somehow or other, we had a feeling that Cott was a very nice person, because a lot of other people weren't. This is way back. This is 1948, 49, a couple of years later.
Yeah.
We brought this person to Dr. Cott to evaluate her.
I'd forgotten that. Who was that?
Robin Ray's wife.
Oh.
Don't you know?
Yeah.
And that was in 48 or 49, whatever
Yeah.
it was. It was after the fact.
Yeah.
So in a sense, we hadn't just poo-pooed everything Reich was doing and the whole thing. We thought Cott was a person who was not brainwashed by Reich the way these other doctors were brainwashed.
They were all bowing down. Yeah.
Get it? And I have no respect for people who go bowing.
Yeah, we were told by somebody, I don't remember who, that at one point Cott noticed that Reich was really getting in rather bad shape emotionally, and he offered to help him. And Reich was furious. Like,
Well,
how dare you? kind of
Dorothy
thing.
Lumen's therapist.
Yeah.
That's what we knew a lot about Cott from
But so our friends were falling away and not being willing to see us anymore, and
told me why.
Yeah, said we have to choose between our therapy and you. And then Emil was thrown out of therapy. That was even before you were thrown out of therapy, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. So then he was thrown out of therapy, and Emil was so depressed. We lived in a one-room apartment in New York at that time,
Very
and I
sad.
remember him lying down on the bed and just being completely gloomy and not wanting to try anything. The Hamiltons tried to. They tried to find.
Yeah,
Yeah.
besides.
The
See, the school went
Hamiltons.
on. The school went on.
The Hamiltons,
tried to get me fired.
a few days after he gets the telegram about being out of therapy, his bosses tried to fire him from his job at the school because he had signed this petition, and Reich apparently told the Hamiltons, get rid of Caccavo. Right? But there was a school board, a board of directors.
But I was,
And the board of directors had known Emil for several years,
Sure.
and did not see any reason why he should be fired, and they did not allow the Hamiltons to fire him.
Right.
At that point, the Hamiltons moved up to Massachusetts and started a boarding school up there. The school in New York continued. The board of directors hired somebody else to direct the school, and it changed its name to the Boardman School.
And I stayed there for 4 years.
Yeah, and
I
Emil,
left.
Emil, who had just started college at the age of 27 at night, was working his way through, and when he got to the point where he
got my first degree.
Was going to be a student teacher, where you're doing like field work and social work, the person who's studying to be a teacher does teaching under supervision in a school setting. So he'd been allowed to teach before that at the school, but the official student teaching he did at Boardman School when it had changed its name. And he was supervised by a wonderful woman.
See, I went to school, I got my first degree, I was 33, a long time. And I didn't get my PhD until I was 51 years old. So we've had a life of studying. Penny has done a lot of studying. And so this has been our life. We feel that we've been successful, we've been good citizens, and we've enjoyed life.
Well, we did run the camp
love, yes,
after he got his
45 years of marriage.
After he got his degree, we found another partner, and we ran the camp for 2 more summers.
2 more summers. 1949, 1950.
Yeah. We had nothing to do with Reich.
Although there were some people we had knew about Reich, and then we had some people in therapy, but we didn't.
At that point, we made it very clear that we had nothing to do.
You want to come to us, fine.
Yeah.
But that's good.
But then they stopped running the camp because his partner decided to go into another field.
He's a TV director.
And Emil decided that he needed to go to graduate school in the summer as well as in the winter, and it was too far away. We had moved to Pennsylvania, and so we sold the farm finally. Got the down payment for this house.
Yeah, that was very interesting. We bought the place that had lots of lumber on it, and we didn't realize it.
Well, that's not part
of
the story.
And then we were able to get rid of the lumber, and then we sold the place, and we had a down payment on this house. I didn't know didn't even know it.
Not when we bought the place.
Everybody else up there knew it.
Our next door neighbor did wood cutting in the wintertime. In the summer, he took care of horses at a summer resort. And he told us that if we would want to sell some of that wood to help pay for the well and the electricity and so forth.
Driven well, put electricity in. We did a lot to that place in the summer of '48.
But so this neighbor said you could sell some wood. We hated the idea of cutting down
But it
wood.
didn't look fine, didn't do any harm to the place.
But
nice.
They made sure that they did it far back in the woods where we wouldn't be able to see from the house where the wood was cut. And it grows up very fast again.
Spruce and fir.
Yeah.
They use it for paper, to make paper, that kind of wood. Christmas trees.
But that was years later. Yeah. So anyway...
we can think of other things, people after, but
we had nothing further to do with the Orgone Institute. And at somewhere around the same time, no, it was earlier. I guess my mother told you that she had been in love with Wolf, and Wolf was in love with her. Reich told them they must not get married.
You broke it up. She told you that, huh?
Yeah.
She did tell you, huh?
And it was a big tragedy in my mother's life.
Yeah.
And I liked Wolf very much.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after, then Wolf married Gladys Meyer. And it wasn't long after that Reich threw Wolf out.
Yeah.
Because there were other doctors who were studying with Reich who apparently gossiped to Reich and said negative things about Wolf to Reich. And I don't know what they said, but I know that Wolf was very loyal, absolutely loyal. He didn't like the fact that Reich was going into cancer research. He would have preferred that Reich stay with psychological therapy.
Yeah.
And the cancer research, he may have said something to Reich about, I wish you would stay more in the psychological aspect of things. Anyway, he was thrown out. And he had a beginning tuberculosis. And he just let the tuberculosis run. And
he had had it once before.
Yeah.
and he got cured.
And he got cured, but
talk about
the
money.
tuberculosis.
Reich, it's very interesting about money.
He got depressed.
We found out years later, my mother-in-law was shocked. By the way, we were persona non grata with my mother-in-law, too. I mean, she was all for Reich and again us.
Yeah.
So this is not very nice. Where's the family loyalty, right? That you talked about a little while ago. But it's very interesting. My wife was going, and I couldn't understand that. She was making about $28, $29 a week. And she was giving Reich $30 a week for 3 half-hour sessions at $10 a piece. Okay. But I found out years later that my mother-in-law had given Reich a lot of money for her therapy. So Reich collected twice. And I got the neurosis about money. Who's got the neurosis about money? Okay?
Yeah.
That's my...
I paid him and my mother paid him.
Yeah. And I'm neurotic about money? Who? And he used to say to her that she came from a capitalistic background, and that's the reason she had to pay as much as she did.
Yeah.
Penny's father would not let her go into therapy. Penny went to college. She was going to Swarthmore. She wanted to go see a psychiatrist, and her father said, nothing doing. She thought she could see a psychiatrist while she went to school in Philadelphia. Father said, nothing doing, you're perfectly happy. So Penny shocked her father, quit college, came to New York. Luckily for me, I met her. No. Because my mother was not organized.
Right.
She didn't think it was the same.
She thought that it would just be, she would give them some money and they wouldn't charge me. Or they would charge me less. Well, Reich charged me $10 for a half-hour session.
$20 an hour, which is a lot of money those days.
Yeah, instead of $20 for a 50-minute session. He saw me for 30 minutes, and I paid $10. And maybe what my mother gave him made up the difference, but I still had a short
Penny,
session.
Because that was considered a good rate at the time.
But I still had a short session.
Yeah, all right.
And I paid what the doctors paid.
Right.
I know that he was charging up to $50.
Wait now,
by the
Mickey
time I
Sheriff
left
in
there.
1947-48.
We don't know.
No, Mickey Sheriff told me.
Oh.
He said, Reich, he said, my God, he said, he's getting $50 an hour from me. But he was getting it because Mickey Sheriff's parents were rich like crazy, Charged me $14 a session. No, $7 a session, Lowen charged me. Because it was $98, I felt he cheated me. And years later, when he wrote us a letter, he wanted to do a book on Reich. He wanted to meet with us.
He interviewed us.
And I told him at the time, you son of a bitch, you owe me $98 as far as I'm concerned, He took us out to dinner. I'm an Italian. You know what vendetta is?
Yeah.
That's me. I'm a great vendetta guy. You screw me up, man, I fix you. That's how I am. It's neurotic. We know it's neurotic, but that's me.
Back in 1946, as a teacher, what were you making?
And I was making $100 a month. $100 a month. Well, no, during the war is a good way to do it. Penny was making $30 a week during the war. She was paying...
I was paying Reich $30 a week.
I was making $50
My father was still giving me
you an idea what money,
$20 a month, which he used to give me for buying my clothes when I was in college. And he continued giving me $20 a month, with which I paid my rent. My rent was $5 a week. And
so it's 10 times up.
More than that today. Much more than that. Much more than that. Take a house like this cost $20,000 30 years ago. $400,000 today. It's crazy.
Okay, well, that's really have an imagination.
It's very hard to figure that. Figure it out. I used to wonder when I first met her. I spent weekends together. I used to wonder why she ate so much. Now I know why. She didn't eat all week. She ate
yes,
weekends when I
did.
paid for it.
Well, I ate in the company cafeteria. They had very inexpensive meals.
Look, there's a
For 20
side
cents,
to this,
for
too.
20 cents, I got a terrific breakfast, and for 40 cents, I got a terrific lunch. And then for dinner,
And today, a cup
I
of
didn't
coke
have
is
a
50
I didn't have a
cents.
kitchen because I lived just in a room that had no kitchen. And dinner, 75 cents at the local diner.
No, there's a big difference. No, $50 in 1947-48 that Reich was getting from Mickey Sheriff was a lot of money. By the way, as far as money's concerned, I will say this about him. He lived very simply, Dr.
Yes.
Reich. And when monies he came in, he put into his work.
Yeah.
I will say that for him. If you notice, I've been very positive about him in some ways. He's just a son of a bitch the way he handled me.
Yeah, well, before they had this disagreement about the deposit for Peter's camp tuition, Reich was nice to us. As I said, he gave us a Christmas present a couple of times. He and Mrs. Reich had a subscription to chamber music at the 92nd Street YMCA, YMHA in New York.
They would give us tickets.
And it's they have a lot of cultural events at that Y. And he gave us tickets because they couldn't go one evening. He gave us tickets so that
It was a nice relationship.
yes, it was a very nice thing to do. And he was so nice to us until this situation occurred at the camp.
Right.
It was fine. I really worked mostly for Ilse, and then every now and then he would come and show me something down in the lab. He would show me how to do things with the mice, how to inject, and I didn't see him very much. Oh, and he had a seminar. He was...
a lot of seminars.
yeah, he had a regular weekly seminar. I think it was Wednesday evenings, just like Freud. Maybe it was Thursday evenings, I'm not sure. And people who were studying with him would come and meet in the laboratory at 9906 69th Avenue, Forest Hills. And he would explain about his theories.
I have to go 2 hours before I go to the doctor, right? I better go leave you, take
Yeah,
you.
okay.
I'll come down later if you're still around.
Okay.
It sounds great, it's almost embarrassing. I have to leave, I have to go to the doctor. I have to do certain things before I go to the doctor.
Is there something I can do?
She wants to take a photo.
Oh, all right, fine. Well, it's a funny way to take a photo. Take it from here only up to here. Otherwise, you have these Americans, these rich Americans that play tennis, Okay, sure.
We had a lot of rich Americans now in almost.
No, well, we're pretty simple folk, we think, you know.
We met many nice people in America.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to go upstairs. And you can, you don't need me, you know. If you
Okay.
want to chat a little bit, any thoughts. Some things may come to your mind,
Yeah, maybe if I could
You
get
see,
out
you
the
get
photograph album.
you can do that. You see, you get a feeling. We hope we gave you a feeling of the man, the way he was.
Yes,
You see,
it did.
that's important.
Well,
He may do good work.
a little more of that would be nice if you can remember any of the good things between you and Reich before the
Well, there weren't that many things.
horrible
for you, but-
meeting.
No, we didn't have that many important things.
Just there was a good
It was
feeling.
a very
between
good
them at
feeling, I would
first.
say that, and I think perhaps that's probably contributed to my terrible disappointment,
The fact that it was good at first.
Yeah. But as I said to him before, a couple of friends of mine were saying you could write an article on this whole thing, and and I said, it's an idea, but I don't want to do it because I still think that he has something to contribute. Why should I take away?
We didn't want to write
I
a
didn't want to write
destructive
negative,
article.
you know?
You don't want to do Lowen any harm by having that telegram reproduced.
That doesn't bother me one bit.
That was before he went to medical school. It was before he learned a
But
lot
don't
of things.
reproduce that. But
See, Lowen was a friend
we used to
before,
go skiing together and all.
which was a
He
mistake.
started us skiing.
It's a
was very
mistake
nice.
to take a friend into therapy, anyhow.
Yeah, well, but that's disputable. That's never really resolved. Freud took his daughter in therapy.
I know.
So justify it, right? Okay.
Just the fact that he sent that
Yeah.
telegram to Emil, I think he's ashamed of that himself now, I don't want to do the man any harm,
Yeah.
because it was an unethical thing to do. And he learned a lot. He went all the way through medical school after that and psychiatric residency. Wrong for Reich to take advantage of people's transferences, to order them around, throw this person out, stop seeing that person. This was terrible. I saw him shout at that man who later became a Trappist monk. But that was because he was studying in the laboratory and doing microscope work at the same time I was. So, we were both working on the premises with Reich. See, in Forest Hills, the only people working there were myself and Mrs. Reich.
Yeah.
And in the laboratory up in Maine, there was just myself and Alex Barakan. Sometimes Eva would be there.
Mm-hmm.
There were some visitors, doctors who were visitors, but the only workers there wasn't an atmosphere of fear. It was just that Reich had a temper. And if something would rub him the wrong way,
So
he
you
wasn't
have to-
constantly having temper outbreaks, but there was something about him that was a little bit like a volcano. You know, you didn't know when it was going to erupt. And I had no idea about the miserable experiences he'd had in his early life, which I only learned about when I read Ilse's biography of him that explained about his mother's suicide. None of us knew any of those things. She only found those things out after he died. After he died, she went over there and tried to find out information about him, even though he had mistreated her. Well, it was personal contact. It was
Distance.
not. I respected her. It wasn't a social relationship, but it was a kindly feeling. And then when she wrote this terribly formal, business-like letter, you know, it was such a rejection. And then later, when I found out that he, towards the end of his life, or before he was arrested, that he was drinking, and he was physically cruel to her. I don't know if she told you. He threw her against the wall, and I think it was either dislocated her shoulder or something. He was physically cruel to her. Sheriff did not report that in his book. And the way I got back in touch with Ilse and Peter was that my stepsister, she's the daughter of a man my mother married later after she and Wolf broke up. And she is a psychiatric social worker in Boston. And I don't know how, she met Peter, who also lived in Boston or Cambridge. And they got to know each other. And she met Myron Sheriff, invited him over. She's my stepsister, whose name is also Penny, is a very hospitable person. And she invited my mother up, said, would you like to have a reunion with Ilse Reich and Peter and so forth? And my mother was thrilled, and she went up. And I still wasn't so thrilled. I was still keeping my distance because the traumas were still there. But my stepsister told me she thought we really should meet Peter. Meanwhile, I had read Peter's book. Have you read his book?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, that book is such a tragic book. It makes me cry, that book. What that little boy went through, you know, being told that people from outer space are coming down to... Oh. You know, A.S. Neal tried to tell Reich not to talk that way, and then Reich dropped Neal, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was dropping people one after another. It was his illness. His friends who stayed with him did not acknowledge that he was ill. They tried to make it look as though Ilse was sick and Reich was just fine, you know. He had become paranoid, and this can happen. It can happen to people, but he wasn't getting any help for it. Reading the book Fury on the Earth, it sounds as though Michael Silvert, the doctor who was working with him, I don't know if I ever met him, but it sounds as though Michael Silvert had some need to be punished, that he shipped orgone accumulators across the state line in defiance of the Food and Drug Administration in order to get arrested, I think. And I think he brought that down upon himself and Reich. Maybe Reich was agreeing with Silvert on this. But Reich didn't need to go to prison. Even though they suppressed his literature because they claimed that the orgone accumulator was some kind of hokum, you know, fake. They thought it was fakery of some kind. Even though people, you know, signed a statement and so forth, I still don't... If he had allowed a good lawyer to defend him, it might have been okay, but he wouldn't allow a lawyer to defend him. And he said, I will only testify before a jury of my peers. He only wanted scientists on the jury. You can't choose who's going to be on the jury. And it was like he was saying to them, punish me. either he or Silvert, I don't know which, but I heard that Silvert committed suicide. Such a tragic thing, because this man had so much talent. And you know, when Van Allen began coming out with his publications about the Van Allen belt, the energy belt around the Earth, Van Allen, talked to a physicist. I said, this begins to sound to me like some of the things Reich was talking about. And when publications began coming out about cancer happening after a deep depression, I cut out these articles and I kept them. And even I wonder, I think there was an article in Science magazine once about perhaps when there's a volcano that erupts and this very, very hot material goes into the ocean, it may be that new life is formed as a result of that. There was just that one reference I saw in a scientific magazine. Of course, Reich wasn't mentioned, but that's what Reich was trying to do with the sand that he would heat up over a Bunsen burner and plunge it into a test tube. And he was trying to create these things he called Sapa ions. I don't know, I don't recall whether he succeeded in creating some while I was working in his laboratory, but he had already published about them. And he had me watching what they call grass infusions. You take a little grass, put it in some water, and wait a week or two, and it starts to get kind of rotten. And you take a little bit, you put it on a pipe, on a slide with a pipette, and you look, and all these little animals are in there. And I spent many happy hours in his laboratory with his marvelous microscopes. He had a Reichert and a Leica, and they were, I think one was 3,000 magnification, which was unheard of in those days, because that was before the electron microscope. And he took microphotographs. We would examine the blood under the microscope to see how it disintegrated, and whether the erythrocytes would have little spikes around the edge or whether they would disintegrate into. And then, besides watching it under the microscope, he would also put some blood into a test tube of broth and autoclave it. That was one of my jobs. And then look at a drop of that afterwards to see what kind of product of the cooking took place. And his theory was that a person whose system is giving up would disintegrate into tiny little things, which he called T bacilli. And a healthy person, the blood would disintegrate into nice little fat blue viands. And that was very interesting work, you know, and I was very sorry that somebody didn't continue with this work, but they're doing it in Germany. Are they doing it here too? Do you know? See, I haven't kept up with it because, well, maybe I should subscribe to some of their journals and see what they're doing. But for many, many years, if anybody mentioned the word orgone or the word Reich, I would feel adrenaline going right through my system.
Hat sie Dr. Wolf gesehen nach diesem Bruch mit Reich?
No, I didn't see him after Wolf at that meeting, that horrible meeting, where they all agreed with Reich that the emotional plague was.
Who was it?
Wolf was there. Willie was there. Who was some of the other? Trop.
Simeon Trop?
I think two Trops were there.
Oscar.
I never got to know them, but I think they were both at that meeting. I don't know who else was there. But I never saw any of those people afterwards. And Wolf and my mother, I forget if they'd already broken up, but we had no wish to see Gladys Meyer. She Yes, she was one of the people who said that there was a lack of seriousness at our camp. Gladys was a very kind of prim, rather rigid person, you know. And Wolf was a little bit rigid too. My mother was good for Wolf. Because my mother's very not rigid. She would know the reasons better than I. I think he told my mother that Wolf should marry a younger woman who could bear children for him. Well, she didn't talk to me about it for a long time. She was still, she thought everything Reich did was right. It must be right, she must be wrong. He's right, she's wrong. Whatever he decided must be good. And when we tried to tell her, she was angry at me for not being at the Orgon Institute anymore. And when we tried to tell her what happened, she wouldn't listen. She didn't want to hear. I liked Wolf. I liked Wolf better than I liked Reich. In therapy too, I wished that Wolf could have continued as my therapist, but because of his relationship with my mother, we couldn't. But and the therapy, it was what he called vegetotherapy. And I had to wear the nearest thing to a bikini, a two-piece bathing suit, so he could see what my muscles were doing, you know. But at that time, he was not touching. He would take a mirror and say, look at that jaw. Look what that jaw is doing. And he would tell me, breathe, you know, breathe through. And to allow the orgasm reflex to take place in breathing, you know, on the couch, and a lot of free association he did, and he would ask a question every now and then, and try to get me to breathe, and I should feel my stomach, and that's a very tight stomach, you know, and breathe, let the stomach soften, you know. But he wasn't touching yet. Now I stopped therapy with him. See, I was about 18 months in therapy with him. I think, was it longer than that? But eventually another woman was working in his laboratory, whose name was Jimmy Innes. And she was a woman old enough to be my mother. She had no children of her own. And she and her husband were both in therapy with Reich. And by that time, he was calling his psychiatric therapy, he wasn't calling it vegetotherapy anymore, he was calling it orgone therapy. And he was starting to push down on people's chests to make them breathe. Push. Thank God he didn't do that to me. Anyway, she would come home and there would be black and blue marks on her chest. And her husband was infuriated. And he was agonized because he was in therapy with Reich too, and yet Reich was bruising his wife, and this couple was a very tortured couple. Eventually, he died of cancer of the lung. He smoked as heavily as Reich did. Reich smoked endlessly. He would get these huge cigarettes that came in like a little test tube. They were bigger than a normal cigarette, but they were white. They weren't mini cigars. They were white paper on them. And there was a little cork. You'd take off, you'd uncork a cigarette. And
you uncork the cigarette?
Uncork this little test tube and take out the cigarette. I don't know what they were called, but each cigarette came in a little glass tube. And he had a whole bunch of them. He'd smoke one after another. He was a real chain smoker. And he would cough and cough and cough. He would have these outbreaks of coughing. And none of the information was available yet about lung cancer. Nobody had published anything about tobacco causing cancer of the lung. And he smoked one after another of these cigarettes. But what was I talking about Reich and the smoking? Oh, and he loved Beethoven. And he would play the piano every now and then. He had a piano in his living room. And I don't remember if I heard him play or if I just fantasized him playing. But I imagined that he would play with great flourish, with lots of banging, And Wolf played the harpsichord, the lute, and the recorder. And he had put together a little harpsichord of his own, a spinet, I guess you would call it, a small one, that he had in his apartment. And he tried to teach me to play the recorder. Wolf did. And Wolf loved Bach and Baroque music. And I think my love for Baroque music dates back to hearing it from my mother. Played many Baroque records while she was going with Wolf. And it's my favorite kind of music, is Baroque. But I didn't practice hard enough on my recorder, so I never got to be a good recorder player. But Mrs. Reich once jokingly said to me that Reich likes Beethoven and Wolf likes Bach because Wolf likes things tied up in neat little packages. Of course, there are people who would not agree that there's anything about neat little packages in Bach, but he's certainly more tightly packaged than Beethoven.
Yeah.
Reich was definitely of the Romantic era. And I think we had a little organ box that mice would be put in from time to time. But I remember more giving them shots made from viands. And I can't remember how the viands were made. What kind? Now, what were they made?
Mouse blood?
Earth viands, I think. No, I think they were boiled earth. I've forgotten a lot. And I wouldn't have been keeping the records. Mrs. Reich and Reich kept the records on those things. I was asked to keep records for a while on pendulums, the timing of the swing of pendulums of different length. And once Reich drove me out to Jones Beach so we could be at sea level. And we measured pendulum swings there. But I don't remember the results. So.
I'm all set.
All set?
Well, yeah, all set. I took care of the necessary things that you do before you go to a doctor,
Oh, dear.
I'm just getting an examination.
Would you like to see pictures that I have?
Sure. Sure.
Soll ich die alle einzeln aufnehmen?
Here we are. At the beach.
Yeah.
When we were first going around together. Let's see, I'll see if I can find. Here, that's Peter Reich.
Ah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that's me.
Aha.
And Ilse.
Ja. Ja. Das ist ja interessant.
Toll.
Ja.
But that has nothing to do, that's an old friend of mine. But this is when I was working.
Okay.
I'm wearing my laboratory coat.
Ja, okay. Wir halten das mal so hin, dass die Kamera. Ja? Hast du das Bild von den beiden?
Ja.
So, da ist das Mikrofon.
Ja, ich nehme es mal weg.
Okay.
Nee, so schnell geht das nicht. Ich muss immer jedes Bild neu einstellen. Was
Maybe you need more light right on the picture. Maybe if I put it over here, the light will shine.
Ja. Was ist mit dem Licht? Geht das mit dem Licht?
Das Licht ist
Ja, das bleibt so.
Okay.
Ja. Dann ganz schön verrückt, wie es ausgesehen hat früher. Ne? Und wer ist das jetzt da auf der anderen Seite?
Ja, das ist Peter Reich.
Ja, und?
Ja. Das ist eine Freundin.
Hello?
Okay, warte.
Yes.
Da gibt's nichts weiter.
Wir gucken mal die Kinder.
Yes.
The children in the camp.
Yes, yes. Yes. $7.95. Strand Bookstore. Okay, give me your phone number again. 1452 $7.95. Is that postpaid? No. Well, if we order it, what will shipping $2.75. And how late are you open? Oh, open till 9:30. And where are you located? 12th and Broadway. Oh, okay, thank you. Right.
Theater.
We'll
Auf diesen
decide
Bildern,
later
das
and let
ist
you know.
sie mit ihrem Kittel.
Yes, please. Hold on
Peter
for
Reich.
today at least.
Ja.
Thank you. Right. Bye-bye.
Das andere ist Ilse.
These are children on the camp.
Yeah, that's my sister.
Oh,
Yeah.
They're beautiful.
If I can find something in here. This little boy grew up to be Jeremy Steig. Did you ever hear of Jeremy Steig? Yeah, he made Reich cartoons. Listen, listen, little man. Yeah, that's Bob Kronmeyer. He was Emil's partner the first year at the camp. These pictures show up doing finger painting here. It just shows pictures of the children swimming. Oh, and here's some more pictures of Peter. That's Peter, and that's Peter. He's got a pipe in his mouth here.
Was man näher dran, das ist jetzt doch zu weit.
Aha. Die wollten noch irgendwas machen.
So, ja.
Peter.
Kriegst du das noch von der Entfernung?
Nee, das ist so.
Muss ja nicht Bildführung sein.
Der sieht richtig frech aus. Ne? Freche kleine Junge. Freche Erfindung.
Yeah, here's Emil and Bob Kronmeyer together, the two partners, talking about finances. It says that here's Bob with children sitting on his lap. He used to be good at playing the guitar. He later became quite a fashionable psychologist. I think he had an office on Park Avenue South, and one of his patients was one of the Gabor sisters. This is Myron Sheriff.
Ah, das müssen wir auch.
That's what he looked like when we knew him. He was
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
cute boy. He was very young then. He was,
Yeah.
well, I was, 1946, I was 22. He was probably 20.
Verrückt, ne?
Ach.
Kann ich gar
And there's
keine
Peter.
Ja.
Ähnlichkeit sehen.
Doch, das sehe ich schon.
Ja. Mit wem ist denn der Peter da?
Das sind doch alle sehr jung gewesen, ne?
Oh, and that's Peter.
Ja.
And that's the little girl that we took up there.
Macht's
Her,
man
her
mehr
mother
ein bisschen
was
mehr?
our camp cook.
So ein bisschen mehr so aufrecht.
Did that not you done?
Peter and Susie? I guess. I wasn't around much, you know. I was over at the laboratory all the time. So while the children were at the camp, Peter went home every night. And while the children were at the camp during the day, I was over at Organon working in the laboratory. I think I found some pictures of the laboratory or something. Unless that's on a different book. That's also Peter. book. This one. Yeah, I think this was my proposal to my husband. Will you be my Valentine?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Ah, here's.
Das ist das Observatorium.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't been there since all this, so I've never seen the observatory. It was a wooden, but only back then.
Yeah.
There was no stone on it yet. And he had 2 children when he died, and she's the one, Penny Tyson Adams, who is a friend. Peter is a close friend. Peter and Susan are close
Yeah,
friends
yeah.
of Penny and Barclay.
Yeah.
Barclay's a doctor.
Yeah.
And, that's Jimmy Innes, who worked in the laboratory along with me. Oh, and here's a picture of Ilsa and Peter, but you can't see it very well.
Hier. Bitte Kamera. Zu nah dran.
Das ist für sowas Überbelichtetes, kann man.
Did you ever hear of Pete Seeger?
Yeah, sure.
He's a personal friend of his.
Guitar player.
His wife, Toshi, she and I were girls together.
Here you are.
Her father was an artist, and he was a good friend of my mother's,
Yeah.
Toshi's father. So my mother's best friend was the mother of Toshi.
Oh, you know who Pete Seeger is, huh?
Yeah, sure.
But my mother was never interested in politics. It just happened that when Pete Seeger married Toshi, that was how my mother met Pete Seeger. But Toshi's mother was my mother's very, very close friend. These are pictures from the Hamilton School, the school where Emil and Bob Kronmeyer both were teaching. This little girl is Lucy Rockefeller. There were some rich children at that school. The rich ones didn't come to our camp, however. Here's the farm. These are some of the same pictures. We had a separate album just for the camp.
Yeah.
And,
Early colours.
yeah, very early. Sure. Oh, and these are pictures inside the laboratory. This is here. Here I am, and I don't know who that doctor is. I didn't put his name down. He was a visiting doctor. I didn't know his name, but I'm looking through the microscope, and Mrs. Reich is showing this doctor something through the microscope, and that's Alex Barracan, the Englishman that I mentioned.
Das war im Studentenlabor?
Ja.
Ja.
Das war das einzige Gebäude.
Ah ja.
That's the laboratory too from the outside.
Yeah.
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 It's just been completed almost. You can see the piles of wood there. They were still working on it. And this was after the horrible meeting. I think the expression on my face was typical after that for a moment. So after that, no more. Oh, and in the winter, this was the wood, some of the wood that was cut by our neighbor up there to help pay for the land. I don't think so. Reich had a way of exaggerating by his wishes. You know, like he thought I was getting my PhD already and I was not even getting my bachelor's degree. He probably thought Bill was a mathematician. I think Bill was a graduate student of mathematics at the University of Chicago. But Mickey Sheriff could tell you more about Bill. Maybe. This was my friend Jimmy who worked in the
Are you going to feed these people?
Yep.
Because there are a couple of
Just
cookies here left.
riffling through here to, yeah, well, I will get some fruit out too.
All right, sweetie, I need 3 minutes of your time, or even less.
This is Bill Washington. This
He's
is
the one I
Norman
told you about, that
Sheriff.
fellow, remember?
This is his wife, Greta.
Ever hear of Greta Hoff?
Yeah.
How'd you hear about her? From Europe?
Field? Penny Caccavo here. Caccavo. Hi. Yes, right. Yeah, vice versa too. Mm-hmm. Yes, she mentioned it. Yes, mm-hmm, right. Okay. Did I by any chance lend you some notes once about the seminars that Reich used to give? And you have them?
Good.
Well, those would have been in my handwriting. And if you have them, I would like them back.
Give me the address.
Yes, Penny Caccavo, C-A-C-C, A, V as in Victor, O.
Ist er das noch?
Keine Ahnung. Die Bänder kriegen wir jedenfalls.
And if you would like some more coffee at this point, you just tell me.